The United States may soon have its own digital dollar, which would track transactions, while giving banks and governments full control over how people spend their money. The New York Federal Reserve has launched a 12-week program for a central bank digital currency, with participants including Mastercard, Citi, HSBC, TD Bank, Wells Fargo, and others. As this takes place, Nigeria has gone from rolling out a digital currency to forcing it on its citizens by restricting the amount of physical cash people can withdraw. Central bank digital currencies not only represent a new form of money, but also new potential for tyrannical social controls. Now, this is according to Nick Corbishley, investigative journalist and author of Scanned: Why Vaccine Passports and Digital IDs Will Mean the End of Privacy and Personal Freedom. We speak with Corbishley about why what's happening with digital currencies in New York and Nigeria matter for the world, how digital currencies can be used by authoritarian regimes, and where the world is heading if the new form of currency is not challenged. Nick Corbishley, great having you back on Crossroads.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
You know, Nick, one of the biggest stories that happened recently I think was easy to miss, which was in Nigeria, of all places, and people might wonder why Nigeria, matters to us in the West, right? What does it matter? They recently made a new ruling when it comes to the digital currencies, and I want to talk to you about what happened there and why this matters. Tell us what happened first.
Okay, so this is a story that came to light when the central bank essentially announced that as of January the 9th this coming year, the bank, basically people will only be able to withdraw something like $45 per day from their bank accounts. And this is like an 87% reduction in what they normally are able to withdraw from their bank accounts. It's a massive change in people's lives. It's a huge policy to have suddenly announced at a time that Nigeria's economy is struggling, and at a time that the central bank is desperately trying to rescue, to salvage a digital currency that it launched roughly just over a year ago that has essentially flopped.
Interesting. So Nigeria, the central bank there, tried rolling out a digital currency. People didn't want it. And basically when it was on its way to failing, because people want to use cash still, the government starts restricting the amount of cash people can take out, interestingly, at a time when they really need it.
Yes.
So what does that say to us? Like, does it mean they're forcing this agenda on people? And then at what cost? Tell us about this.
We have at the moment, maybe your viewers already know, something like 90% of the central banks on the planet are experimenting or are looking into launching digital currency. But very few have actually gone as far as Nigeria. And the Central Bank of Nigeria launched what's called the e-Naira in October last year. And like I said, it's been an incredible flop. It's only managed to get something like just under a million people to download the application that allows people to use this central bank digital currency. But of those, only something like 280,000 people are actually using it. And this is in a country with a population of around 220 million people. So the uptake has been around about 0.1%. And this is despite the fact, to put it this way, despite the fact that the central bank has done everything, and the government have done everything they can to encourage people to use it. They have banned banks from allowing transactions or enabling transactions involving cryptocurrencies in a country where cryptocurrencies are gaining more and more interest. And so after a year, we were in this position where it seemed like it wasn't working. So what the central bank did was it said, we're going to do what's called demonetization. Now, this is something that happened in India in 2016 with absolutely devastating consequences for ordinary Indian people Indian businesses and the Indian economy. It's well established that this had a huge impact on economic growth in India for at least a year or two. Basically, demonetization involves withdrawing high value notes from the economy in order to reintroduce the notes in a new format. The problem with it is that it can also be used to reduce the ability of people to use cash, which is precisely what I warned a month or so ago in an article about this. Lo and behold, this week, the central bank has announced that they are going to engage in my view, one of the most aggressive wars on cash that we have seen in the last decade. So a lot of people in Nigeria do not have bank accounts. So a lot of people get cash through point of sales transactions. So it's like they're getting cash back. And this is how most people live. And by the central bank saying like, we are essentially going to significantly reduce how much you can do that, it's going to have an enormous impact on people's ability to survive. It's going to have an impact on businesses' ability to have enough cash flow. And it's going to have a significant impact on an economy and a currency that are already in serious trouble.
You said you wrote an article warning about this war on cash. What was the writing on the wall that made you want to write that? What was your main point?
Well, I mean, like we've seen the war on cash has been going for roughly, you could say 7, 8, 9 years. It could be longer than that even, but at least over the last decade, we've seen a gradually escalating war on cash. It's no secret that there are very powerful interests who would love to have a world without cash. Top of that list are, of course, companies like Apple, companies like Google, many of the payments providing companies like Visa and Mastercard. I mean, they've not kept it a secret. They've said very clearly, we want to kill cash. Then you have banks that have an interest in reducing our use of cash because it's expensive for them. They would much rather have a world where we're just constantly using digital forms of money. And the central banks now, you kind of have a double message from the central banks. On the one hand, the central banks are saying we want to preserve cash because it's important in the face of the threat posed by cryptocurrencies and posed by stable coins and all these other digital forms of money, which are kind of like private forms of money. But on the other hand, they are clearly taking very, very large strides towards setting up these central bank digital currencies. And all the central banks, I can guarantee you one thing, all the central banks in the world right now that are relatively important are watching what is happening in Nigeria, and they are learning from what is happening. And not just central banks, we're talking about the World Bank. The IMF was involved in the creation of the e-naira, and it's involved in the implementation. So I mean, like we are seeing, I would say, some very, very powerful concerted parties that are watching this and learning. The problem is that most of the rest of the world are not watching.